Hello everyone. If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
A very unusual best friend. Have you ever felt like giving up on learning English because your brain suddenly becomes silent the moment you want to speak? Before we begin this story, I want to ask you one question. What if the person who changed your life forever was not a teacher, not a language expert, and not even someone your age? What if your best friend was an 80-year-old American woman who showed you that friendship has no age, no limits, and no expiration date? Stay with me because this story may completely change the way you think about English, happiness, and human connection. One cold morning in Oregon in the United States, I walked into a small coffee shop carrying a heavy feeling inside my heart. Outside, the weather was gray and rainy. That kind of American weather that makes people walk a little slower and hold their coffee a little tighter. I sat near a window and opened my notebook to practice English reading. But honestly, I was frustrated. I had been studying English for years, yet every time I wanted to speak, my confidence disappeared. Maybe you understand this feeling. You know many words, but your mouth says nothing. You understand videos, but you cannot answer simple questions. You begin to wonder if learning English is even possible anymore. According to language researchers, this is very common. Many learners do not fail because they lack intelligence. They fail because fear blocks their ability to use what they already know. Scientists call it the affective filter. In simple words, stress closes the door between your knowledge and your voice. That was exactly me. I looked outside and quietly said to myself, maybe I'm too old to become fluent. Suddenly, I heard a soft voice beside me. No, you're not. I looked up. An elderly woman with white hair and bright blue eyes smiled at me. She looked elegant and peaceful.
Warm.
Safe. She asked me, "Why do you look so sad?" I answered in simple English. Because English is difficult for me. She nodded. Then she said something I will never forget. English is not a race. English is a friendship. I blinked. A friendship? That sentence surprised me. She explained slowly. When you meet a new friend, you don't become best friends in one day. You spend time together. You make mistakes. You laugh. You listen. Language works exactly the same way. Something inside my heart suddenly relaxed. For years, I treated English like an exam. She treated English like a relationship. And that changed everything. We began meeting every Tuesday morning. Slowly. Patiently. No pressure.
No perfection.
Just conversations. She taught me something fascinating about American culture. She said many Americans appreciate authenticity more than perfection. She smiled and said, people don't remember perfect grammar. They remember genuine people. That was shocking to me. For years, I was hiding because my grammar was imperfect. Meanwhile, Eleanor was telling me that human connection mattered more. During one conversation, she asked me a simple question. What makes you happy? My brain froze. Then she smiled. Take your time. This was another lesson. Real conversations are not speed competitions. Native speakers pause too. Thinking is normal. Silence is normal. According to communication studies, people often underestimate how much time they have before answering. In reality, a small pause makes conversations feel more natural and confident. Eleanor knew this. She taught me to breathe before speaking. She said, your brain is not broken. It is simply organizing thoughts. That advice was powerful. Suddenly, English felt less scary. One day she brought old family photos. She showed me pictures of her husband, her children, and her grandchildren. She smiled with her eyes full of love. My husband and I were married for 52 years. I asked, what is the secret? She laughed. Listen more than you speak. Then she added another sentence. That advice works for marriage and for learning English. I laughed too. Honestly, I was surprised how often life lessons and English lessons connected together. The more I talked to Eleanor, the more my confidence grew. Something strange happened. I stopped trying to impress people. I started trying to understand people. And that changed everything. There is also science behind this. Studies show that emotional connection improves memory retention. When learning is connected to feelings, the brain remembers information more easily. That explains why stories are so powerful. You are not just learning vocabulary. You are experiencing life. You are creating memories. You are training your brain naturally. That is why this channel exists. Not to overwhelm you, not to pressure you, but to let you learn English through human stories. Because can friendship ignore age? I thought for a moment, then I smiled. Yes. She smiled back. Exactly. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds were opening. And somehow, my mind felt lighter too. I realized something important. Sometimes we spend years searching for motivation when all we need is one meaningful conversation. One person. One story. One unexpected friendship. That morning, I walked into a coffee shop hoping to practice English. I walked out with a best friend. And little did I know, this incredible 80-year-old American woman was about to teach me lessons about love, family, American life, and happiness that would completely transform my life in ways I could never imagine. Because the biggest surprise was not her age. It was the secret she had been carrying for 80 years. And when she finally told me that secret, my entire understanding of friendship changed forever. Maybe yours will change too. American life is not what I expected. What if I told you that one of the biggest reasons people struggle to learn English is not because English is difficult, but because they are trying to memorize a language without understanding the life behind the language? Today, something unexpected happened. My 80-year-old American best friend, Eleanor, invited me to spend an entire day with her. I thought I was going to practice English. I was wrong. I was about to discover secrets about American culture, family life, weather, friendship, and happiness that most tourists never see. And one small detail, she said, would leave me thinking about life in a completely different way. The next morning, I arrived at her house at exactly 8 o'clock. In America, punctuality matters. Eleanor always said, being on time is another way of saying I respect you. Her house was small but beautiful. There were flowers in front of the porch, wind chimes dancing in the cool breeze, and a tiny American flag near the front door. The weather was chilly because Oregon mornings can be surprisingly cold even during spring. I smiled because back home, I imagined America as sunny California beaches and giant cities full of skyscrapers. But America is much more diverse than people think. Every state feels almost like a different world. Eleanor laughed when she saw my expression. America is 50 personalities living inside one country, she said. That sentence made me smile immediately. We walked into her kitchen, and I noticed something interesting. Everything felt peaceful. No television was screaming. No phones were ringing. No one was rushing. She slowly prepared breakfast and explained that many older Americans intentionally create quiet mornings to reduce stress. According to psychologists, reducing noise during the first hour after waking up can improve concentration throughout the day. Suddenly, I understood why she always looked calm. Then she asked me a simple question. What is the first thing you do when you wake up? I laughed nervously. I check my phone. She laughed even harder. Ah, so your phone says good morning before your own brain does. That sentence was funny, but it was also true. Studies show that constant notifications can increase anxiety levels and reduce attention span. Eleanor shook her head playfully and said, Your brain deserves a few quiet minutes before the world starts talking. Then she handed me a cup of coffee, and we sat near the window. Outside, people were walking their dogs. One woman waved at us. A man jogging smiled and said, "Good morning." I was surprised. Eleanor noticed immediately. Americans often greet strangers, she explained. Not everyone, but many people do. She told me that small interactions create a sense of community. Even a 5-second greeting can improve mood. Researchers have found that brief social connections increase feelings of happiness during the day. It sounds simple, but human brains need tiny moments of belonging. Then she asked me another question. Do people greet strangers where you come from? I answered carefully in English. Sometimes yes, but not always. She nodded. Different cultures, same hearts. That sentence stayed with me. Different cultures, same hearts. It was beautiful because it was true. As we walked through her neighborhood, she explained more about American life. Some people live very fast lives. Others choose slow living. Many families are busy because parents work long hours. But Americans are also trying to protect family time. She told me that every Friday night, her children and grandchildren come over for dinner. No one is allowed to sit on their phones for too long. They talk, laugh, and share stories. Stories build families, she said. Then she looked at me and smiled. And stories build language too. Again, another life lesson became an English lesson. We stopped near a park filled with giant trees. Children were playing while older couples walked hand in hand. Eleanor pointed at an elderly couple sitting together on a bench. They have been married for 60 years. I was amazed. What is their secret? I asked. Eleanor smiled. They never tried to win arguments. They tried to understand each other. Suddenly, she looked directly into my eyes. The same rule applies when learning English. Stop fighting mistakes. Understand them. That sentence hit my heart. For years, I treated mistakes like enemies. Maybe mistakes were teachers instead. Scientists agree. Research shows that making mistakes strengthens long-term learning when learners receive gentle correction. Perfect learners do not exist. Persistent learners succeed. Eleanor knew this naturally. Then she showed me something unexpected. She pulled out a small notebook she carried everywhere. Inside were lists of things she was grateful for every day. One line said, "Today I saw a beautiful bird." Another said, "Today I laughed with my friend." Another said, "Today the rain smelled wonderful." I stared at her in amazement. You still do this at 80 years old. She laughed. Especially at 80 years old. Then she said something that made me completely silent. People think happiness is a big event. Usually, happiness is 10 tiny moments wearing a disguise.
Wow.
10 tiny moments wearing a disguise. I repeated it slowly in my head. That was probably one of the most beautiful sentences I had ever heard. The afternoon became warmer as we walked home. The clouds slowly disappeared and sunlight filled the streets. Then Eleanor suddenly stopped walking. She looked serious for the first time all day. "Can I tell you a secret?" she asked. I nodded immediately. When I was younger, I was afraid of growing old. That surprised me. She continued softly. But aging gave me freedom. I stopped worrying about being impressive. I started focusing on being present. That sentence felt powerful. Many people watching this video may be worried about age, English, or starting too late. But Eleanor was living proof that life does not end at 80. Sometimes life becomes clearer. Then she smiled mischievously. By the way, tomorrow I want to show you something very special. I became curious immediately. What is it? She laughed. A place where I fell in love for the first time. Suddenly, my eyes widened. My 80-year-old best friend had another incredible story waiting for me. And somehow, I already knew this story would teach me far more than English. Because every day with Eleanor felt like opening a treasure chest full of wisdom hidden inside ordinary moments. And tomorrow, she was about to tell me a love story that would completely change the way I understand relationships forever. The coffee shop where everything changed. What if one simple cup of coffee could teach you more English than hundreds of grammar exercises? Before today's story begins, I want you to imagine something unusual. Imagine sitting across from an 80-year-old American woman who knows thousands of life secrets, and suddenly she says, "Today, I will tell you about the day I fell in love for the first time." Instantly, my curiosity exploded. I forgot about vocabulary lists, pronunciation mistakes, and all the pressure I used to feel when learning English. Suddenly, learning English felt like opening the next chapter of an exciting movie that I did not want to pause. The next morning, Eleanor invited me to a small coffee shop she had visited for more than 40 years. The building was old, cozy, and filled with warm yellow lights. Soft jazz music played in the background. Outside, the weather was cool and peaceful. The streets were clean and people moved without rushing. Eleanor smiled as she walked slowly toward the same corner table she always chose. "Some places become part of your life story," she said. "This place is one of mine." I sat down and immediately noticed something interesting. She never looked at her phone. In fact, she had left it inside her purse. That surprised me because most people today cannot stay away from their phones for even 5 minutes. Eleanor laughed when she saw my face. When people constantly look down, they miss life happening right in front of them. According to researchers, excessive phone usage can reduce attention span and weaken face-to-face communication skills. Suddenly, her habit made perfect sense. She wanted to protect real, human connection. Then she ordered 2 coffees and smiled mischievously. "Today is special," she said. My curiosity grew immediately. "Why?" I asked. She laughed softly. "Because this is where I met my first love." My eyes widened instantly. "Here." She nodded. "Exactly here, 60 years ago." Suddenly, the entire room felt magical. Imagine sitting in the exact place where someone's love story began 6 decades earlier. She looked out the window for a moment before speaking again. His name was Thomas. She smiled in a way that people smile when beautiful memories quietly return. I was 20 years old. I was shy, nervous, and very awkward. I laughed. "You? Awkward?" She laughed even harder. "Of course. Young people think older people were born wise. We were confused too." That sentence made me smile. Sometimes we forget that older adults were once young people with fears, dreams, and insecurities, just like us. Then she continued her story. "Thomas sat exactly where you are sitting now." Suddenly, I sat up straighter. She laughed. "He spilled coffee everywhere because he was nervous." I laughed immediately. That sounds like something I would do.
She pointed at me. "Exactly."
"Nobody begins confidently." Then she said something beautiful. "Confidence is built through repetition, not talent." That lesson applies perfectly to learning English. Many people think fluent speakers are naturally gifted, but research says otherwise. Scientists have discovered that repeated exposure and consistent practice strengthen neural pathways in the brain. In simple words, every small conversation is building new roads inside your brain. You are not failing. You are constructing pathways. Eleanor knew this naturally without needing complicated scientific words. Then she told me about her first conversation with Thomas. "He asked me one question," she said. "What makes you smile every day?" She laughed softly. I didn't know how to answer. Then she looked directly at me. "Can you answer that question?" I paused. My brain became quiet for a moment. Then I answered slowly. Learning new things. Talking to kind people. Feeling peaceful. She smiled proudly.
See?
Your English is improving. That surprised me because I was not thinking about grammar anymore. I was simply sharing a real thought. Suddenly, I understood her secret. Real communication is more important than perfect sentences. Then Eleanor explained another fascinating aspect of American culture. She said many Americans enjoy asking open-ended questions because it creates deeper conversations. Instead of asking yes or no questions, they ask questions that invite stories. For example, instead of saying, "Did you have a good day?" they might ask, "What was the best part of your day?" This technique improves conversations and language learning at the same time. Then she gave me a challenge. Every day, ask one interesting question. I smiled. Even if my English isn't perfect, she nodded immediately. That sentence touched my heart again. Throughout my life, I had spent so much energy trying to avoid mistakes that I forgot the purpose of language itself. Language exists to connect people. Then she suddenly became serious. Can I tell you something surprising? I nodded. Thomas and I almost never got married. My eyes widened. Really? She nodded slowly. We almost gave up because we misunderstood each other too often. That shocked me. Then what changed? She smiled gently. We learned to listen. Then she added another powerful sentence. Listening is an act of love.
Wow.
Listening is an act of love. I repeated it in my mind several times. It was beautiful because it was true for relationships and language learning. If you become a better listener, you automatically become a better speaker. Research supports this idea. Active listening strengthens vocabulary acquisition because the brain absorbs patterns naturally when attention is focused. Suddenly, everything connected together. Love, friendship, family, and English were all built on listening. As our conversation continued, sunlight slowly entered the coffee shop through the windows. Then Eleanor reached inside her purse and pulled out an old photograph. It was black and white. She and Thomas were standing together, smiling shyly. But then I noticed something unexpected. Eleanor looked emotional. Her eyes filled with tears, but she was still smiling. Tomorrow, she whispered, I will tell you about the hardest year of our marriage. Suddenly, my heart stopped for a moment. The hardest year? What happened? Did they almost separate? Did life become impossible? She folded the photo carefully and smiled at me again. Sometimes the strongest relationships are built during the hardest seasons. And at that exact moment, I realized tomorrow's story would reveal something even deeper about love, family, and human resilience that could completely change the way we understand happiness forever. The hardest year of their marriage. What if I told you that the strongest love stories are not built during happy days, but during the moments when two people almost give up? Before we continue today's slow English story, I want you to imagine something. Imagine sitting beside your 80-year-old American best friend, holding an old black and white photo, and hearing her whisper, "There was one year when I thought my marriage was over." My heart immediately stopped for a moment. Yesterday, she looked so peaceful, so wise, so happy. How could someone with such a beautiful smile have almost lost everything? And this is exactly why today's story might completely change how you think about love, family, friendship, and even learning English itself. The next morning, I arrived at Eleanor's house earlier than usual because I could not stop thinking about her words. The weather was cold and slightly windy. Dark clouds moved slowly across the sky. Somehow, the atmosphere matched the story she was about to tell. Eleanor opened the door and smiled, but today her smile looked softer, more thoughtful. She invited me inside and prepared tea instead of coffee. Tea is better for difficult stories, she said with a small laugh. Then she sat quietly for a few seconds before speaking. 40 years ago, Thomas and I entered the hardest year of our marriage. My curiosity immediately exploded. What happened? I asked softly. She looked at her hands for a moment and answered. Life became louder than love. That sentence hit me instantly. Life became louder than love. She explained that Thomas was working longer hours, she was raising children, and both of them were exhausted every day. They were not fighting all the time. In fact, that was the problem. They barely talked anymore. Sometimes relationships don't break because of arguments, she said. They break because of silence.
Wow.
That sentence stayed inside my head immediately. Silence can be dangerous too. Then she continued. We were living in the same house, but slowly becoming strangers. According to relationship psychologists, emotional distance often develops gradually rather than suddenly. Couples usually lose connection through tiny habits repeated over time. Less eye contact, fewer conversations, more distractions. Eleanor nodded as if she already knew the science behind it. One day, I realized something scary, she said. I knew more about television shows than I knew about my husband's feelings. That sentence made me laugh a little, but it also felt sad because it sounded true for many people today. She smiled and added, sometimes modern life steals our attention one tiny piece at a time. Then she looked directly at me. And phones make it even easier now. Research shows that excessive digital distractions reduce meaningful conversations between family members. The average person checks their phone dozens of times every day without realizing it. Suddenly, her story felt extremely relevant. Then she told me about a rainy evening that changed everything. She and Thomas were sitting at the dinner table in complete silence. Finally, Thomas spoke. I miss my best friend. Eleanor looked confused. Who? She asked. He smiled sadly and answered. You. Suddenly, tears filled her eyes. That sentence broke my heart, she said. Because he was right. I felt emotional too. Imagine hearing your husband say he misses you while sitting right beside you. That was powerful. Then she explained something fascinating. People think love disappears. Usually, attention disappears first.
Wow.
Attention disappears first. She said that love often remains hidden underneath stress, responsibilities, and exhaustion. Then she laughed softly. Marriage is not a movie. Sometimes marriage is simply washing dishes together after a long day. I laughed too. Then she gave me another lesson. Small actions save relationships. According to psychologists, couples who regularly express appreciation have stronger long-term relationships. Tiny habits matter. Saying thank you matters. Listening matters. Smiling matters. Then Eleanor surprised me again. Thomas and I created a new rule. I leaned forward immediately. What rule? She smiled. 20 minutes every evening. That was all. 20 minutes. No television.
No phones. No distractions.
They simply sat together and talked. At first, it felt awkward. We forgot how to talk, she admitted. That sentence shocked me because many people probably experience the same thing today. Then she smiled. So, we started asking simple questions. What made you smile today? What made you tired today? What are you worried about? What are you excited about tomorrow? Suddenly, they slowly found each other again. And something unexpected happened. Eleanor realized this process was helping my English too. She smiled at me and said, "You don't need complicated vocabulary to build meaningful conversations." Then she challenged me. Can you answer one question? I nodded. She asked, "What are you grateful for today?" I paused and answered slowly. I am grateful for this friendship. She smiled warmly. Perfect. Then she laughed.
See?
Simple English. Deep meaning. That was her secret all along. English was never about using difficult words. It was about expressing real feelings. Scientists support this idea. Emotional learning improves memory retention because the brain stores meaningful experiences more effectively than isolated information. In simple words, your brain remembers stories better than grammar charts. Suddenly, everything made sense. This channel was not about memorizing English. It was about living English. Then Eleanor stood up and walked toward a shelf full of old photographs. She picked one up and handed it to me. It was a picture of her and Thomas years later, smiling together in front of a lake. We survived that difficult year, she said proudly. Then she added another sentence that completely touched my heart. Strong relationships are repaired, not discovered.
Wow.
Repaired, not discovered. So many people spend their lives searching for perfect relationships when real relationships require patience, forgiveness, and effort. Then she smiled again, and her eyes sparkled with excitement. Tomorrow is Friday. I smiled. Why is that important? She laughed mischievously. Tomorrow, my children and grandchildren are coming over. My eyes widened immediately. The entire family? She nodded proudly. Yes, and you are invited. Suddenly, my curiosity exploded again. Tomorrow, I would experience a real American family dinner, see how generations connect, discover how children are raised, and learn even more simple English through everyday conversations. And somehow, I already had a feeling that tomorrow's dinner would reveal another beautiful secret about happiness that most people spend their entire lives searching for. The day I almost gave up speaking English. What if the biggest enemy stopping you from speaking English is not your vocabulary, not your grammar, and not your accent, but a tiny voice inside your head constantly whispering, "You're not good enough"? Before today's story begins, I want you to imagine something. Imagine sitting at a large American family dinner table surrounded by children laughing, grandparents telling stories, delicious food everywhere. And suddenly everyone turns to look at you and asks a very simple question. Your heart starts beating faster. Your hands become cold. Your brain suddenly forgets every English word you have ever learned. That exact moment happened to me, and honestly, I almost wanted to run away. Friday finally arrived. Eleanor was excited all morning. She hummed a song while preparing dinner, and her energy felt contagious. Her children and grandchildren would arrive in a few hours. I was nervous because this would be my first time experiencing a real American family dinner. Movies often show huge houses, perfect smiles, and impossible lives, but Eleanor always reminded me that real America is much simpler than Hollywood. Families are beautifully imperfect, she said. That sentence immediately made me feel more relaxed. The weather was sunny and warm. Birds were singing outside, and the house smelled wonderful. Eleanor was cooking roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread, and homemade apple pie. Food brings people closer, she said with a smile. Then she suddenly looked at me. Today, I have a challenge for you. My eyes widened immediately. What kind of challenge? She laughed softly. You must speak English during dinner. My stomach instantly dropped. What if I make mistakes? She smiled. Excellent. I blinked. Excellent. She laughed again.
Yes.
Mistakes mean you're participating. That sentence surprised me. For years, I believed mistakes meant failure. Eleanor believed mistakes meant progress. According to neuroscientists, mistakes activate learning mechanisms inside the brain. When we notice and correct errors, the brain creates stronger neural pathways. In simple words, Mistakes are proof that learning is happening. Suddenly, I felt a little less afraid. Then the doorbell rang. Eleanor's family had arrived. One by one, everyone walked inside with warm smiles and friendly voices. Her daughter, Sarah, hugged her immediately. Her son, Michael, carried desserts. 3 grandchildren ran around the living room laughing. Nobody looked perfect. Nobody looked stressed. They simply looked happy to be together. Eleanor smiled proudly. This is my favorite part of every week. Then she introduced me to everyone. My heart started beating faster. Sarah smiled and said, "We've heard wonderful things about you." I answered carefully, "Thank you. I'm happy to be here." She smiled warmly. "Your English is great." I immediately wanted to say, "No, it's terrible." But Eleanor quickly interrupted. No negative self-talk at this table. Everyone laughed. Then she looked at me seriously. "Your brain believes what you repeat." That sentence was powerful. Psychologists agree. Repeating negative statements can strengthen self-doubt over time. If you constantly tell yourself, "My English is bad," your brain begins treating that belief as truth. Then Eleanor whispered, "Speak kindly to yourself." During dinner, everyone shared stories about their week. Sarah talked about work. Michael talked about gardening. One grandchild talked about school. Then suddenly everyone looked at me.
Here it was.
The moment I feared all day. Sarah smiled and asked, "What was the best part of your week?" My brain froze for 2 seconds. Usually, this is the moment when panic begins. But then, meeting all of you tonight is the best part. Suddenly, everyone smiled. Sarah said, "That's beautiful." Eleanor looked proud. And then something incredible happened. Nobody corrected my grammar. Nobody laughed at my accent. Nobody judged me. They simply listened. At that exact moment, something changed inside my mind. Maybe people are not waiting for me to fail. Maybe they are waiting for me to connect. Eleanor saw my expression and smiled knowingly. Then she taught everyone one of her favorite family traditions. Every Friday, they answer one interesting question. Tonight's question was simple. What is something you are learning right now? Her youngest grandson answered, "I'm learning to ride a bicycle." Sarah said, "I'm learning patience." Michael said, "I'm learning how to slow down." Then everyone looked at Eleanor. She smiled and answered, "I'm still learning how to be a better friend." Everyone laughed softly. Then she looked at me. "What about you?" I smiled. "I'm learning that English is not scary anymore." Eleanor's eyes sparkled.
Exactly.
Then she added another sentence that immediately touched my heart. Fear shrinks when shared with kind people. According to researchers, supportive social environments reduce anxiety and improve language performance. In simple words, safe people help us grow faster. Suddenly, everything made sense. Maybe I was never afraid of English itself. Maybe I was afraid of judgment. Eleanor knew that secret all along. Then, dessert arrived. Apple pie filled the room with an amazing smell. Everyone became quieter for a moment. Then Eleanor laughed and said, "Now I have another secret to tell you." Everyone looked curious. "Tomorrow," she said, "I will show our friend something very special." I smiled. "What is it?" She grinned mischievously. "The place where our entire family tradition began." My curiosity exploded immediately.
Where?
She smiled softly and answered, "At a tiny lake where Thomas made me a promise 60 years ago." Suddenly, the entire room became silent. A promise? What promise? Did it change her life forever? Eleanor simply smiled and took another bite of apple pie without saying another word. And somehow, I already knew tomorrow's story would reveal one of the most beautiful secrets about love, family, and lifelong friendship that I had ever heard. The secret of a long and happy marriage. What if one promise made beside a quiet lake could keep two people connected for more than 50 years? Before today's story begins, I want you to imagine something unusual. Imagine standing beside your 80-year-old American best friend on a peaceful Saturday morning while she points toward a tiny lake and says, "This is where my husband changed our future forever." Immediately, my curiosity exploded. Yesterday, she told me that she and Thomas survived their hardest year together. Today, I was about to discover the secret that kept their love alive for decades, and somehow, I had a feeling this lesson would also transform the way I learn English, build relationships, and understand happiness itself. The morning air was cool and refreshing. A soft breeze moved through the trees, and the lake looked like a giant mirror reflecting the sky. Ducks floated quietly on the water, while sunlight danced across the surface. Eleanor walked slowly, smiling as if she were visiting an old friend. "I have not changed much," she laughed. "But these trees have become much taller than me." I laughed too. There was something magical about her ability to make simple moments feel important. Then she stopped near an old wooden bench. "This is where it happened," she said softly. My curiosity instantly grew. What happened? She sat down and looked at the water for a few seconds. Then she smiled. "Thomas made a promise." I leaned forward immediately. "What promise?" She answered slowly. "He promised that no matter how busy life became, we would never stop being friends."
Wow.
That sentence immediately touched my heart. Never stop being friends. It sounded simple, but somehow it felt powerful. Then she looked at me and smiled. Many people focus on being lovers. Fewer people remember to remain friends. According to relationship experts, couples who maintain strong friendships have higher levels of long-term satisfaction. In simple words, friendship is often the foundation of lasting love. Suddenly, I understood why Eleanor and Thomas had survived so many difficult years. Then she continued her story. "When we were young, we thought love was excitement." She laughed softly. "Later, we discovered that love is consistency." That sentence surprised me. Consistency. Not perfection. Not grand gestures. Not expensive gifts. Consistency. Then she explained. It means showing up even when you are tired. It means listening even when you are busy. It means caring even during ordinary days. That lesson immediately reminded me of learning English. Many people wait for motivation to appear before they practice. But motivation comes and goes. Consistency stays. Scientists agree. Research shows that small daily habits are more effective than occasional intense study sessions. 10 minutes every day can build stronger language skills than 2 hours once a week. Suddenly, everything connected together again. Love and language both depend on consistency. Then Eleanor smiled and asked me a question. "What is one small thing you can do every day?" I thought for a moment. Maybe practice English for 10 minutes. She pointed at me proudly. Perfect. Then she laughed. Small actions become big transformations. We continued walking around the lake. She showed me a small tree nearby. Thomas planted that tree when our first child was born. My eyes widened. The tree was enormous now. "It's beautiful," I said. She smiled. Growth is invisible at first.
Wow.
Growth is invisible at first. That sentence felt powerful because it applies to almost everything in life. You do not notice language improvement every day. You do not notice stronger friendships every day. You do not notice healthier habits every day. But after months or years, everything changes. Then Eleanor laughed. People quit too early because they expect immediate results. According to psychologists, human brains naturally prefer instant rewards over long-term rewards. This is why consistency feels difficult in the beginning. But repeated actions eventually become habits, and habits require less mental effort over time. Eleanor knew this without needing scientific words. She simply lived it every day. Then she told me another secret. Thomas and I had one rule. My curiosity exploded again. Another rule?
She laughed. Yes.
We never went to sleep angry. I smiled. Did that always work? She laughed loudly.
No.
We were human. Then she explained. The goal was not perfection. The goal was effort. That sentence immediately stayed with me. Effort matters more than perfection. Then she looked at me carefully. That rule also applies to English. I smiled because I already knew what she meant. Keep trying? I asked. She nodded.
Exactly.
Never end the day angry at yourself for making mistakes. That advice felt beautiful. Many language learners punish themselves constantly. They compare themselves to fluent speakers. They criticize every mistake. But Eleanor believed kindness creates growth faster than criticism. Research supports this idea. Self-compassion reduces anxiety and increases learning motivation. In simple words, encouraging yourself works better than attacking yourself. Then we sat together on another bench. She reached inside her bag and handed me a small piece of paper. On it, Thomas had written one sentence many years ago. It said, "Choose each other again every day." I stared at those words quietly. Choose each other again every day. Eleanor smiled. Love is not one decision. It is thousands of tiny decisions. Then she looked at me warmly. The same is true for English. Every day you choose to practice. Every day you choose courage over fear. Every day you choose progress over perfection. Suddenly, I realized this story was becoming much bigger than language learning. It was becoming a guide for life itself. Then Eleanor suddenly became excited. Tomorrow is going to be very special. I smiled immediately. Another secret? She laughed. Yes. Then she pointed toward a large family photo she had brought with her. Tomorrow, I will show you how American families stay connected across generations. My eyes widened. Really? She nodded proudly. And I will tell you a story about my grandchildren that will surprise you. My curiosity instantly exploded again. Because if there was one thing I had learned so far, it was this. Every ordinary day with Eleanor was secretly preparing me for another beautiful lesson. And somehow, I already knew tomorrow would reveal a hidden truth about family, children, and happiness that many people spend their entire lives trying to understand. A day with an American family. What if I told you that one ordinary Sunday afternoon with an American family could teach you more about English, happiness, and human connection than years of studying alone? Before today's story begins, imagine walking into a house filled with laughter, children running around, grandparents telling stories, and the smell of fresh cookies floating through the air. Then imagine your 80-year-old American best friend turning to you and saying, "Today, you will discover why family traditions are stronger than time itself." Immediately, my curiosity exploded because I had a feeling that this day would reveal a secret about happiness that many people search for their entire lives without ever finding. Sunday morning arrived with bright sunshine. The sky was perfectly blue, and the temperature was warm but comfortable. Eleanor looked especially excited today. She wore a light blue sweater and carried a basket full of homemade cookies. "Today is family day," she said proudly. I smiled because her energy was contagious. We drove to her daughter Sarah's house, which was about 20 minutes away. Along the way, she explained something fascinating about American culture. Many families live separately, she said, but they create traditions to stay emotionally close. According to psychologists, Family rituals increase emotional security and strengthen relationships across generations. Simple traditions help people feel connected and supported. Suddenly, I understood why Eleanor valued these gatherings so much.
They were not ordinary events.
They were emotional anchors. When we arrived, the house was already full of life. Children were drawing pictures at the kitchen table. Sarah was preparing lunch. Michael was watering flowers outside. Everyone looked relaxed. Nobody was rushing. Nobody looked stressed. Eleanor smiled and whispered, "This is my favorite sound in the world." I listened carefully. It was laughter. Real, imperfect, joyful laughter. Then her youngest granddaughter, Emma, ran toward us. "Grandma!" She shouted excitedly before giving Eleanor a big hug. My heart immediately felt warm. Eleanor introduced me to everyone again, and today I felt much more comfortable speaking English. That surprised me because just a few days earlier, I had been afraid to speak at all. Eleanor noticed immediately. "See," she smiled. "Confidence grows quietly." That sentence stayed in my mind. Growth is often invisible while it is happening. Then Emma sat beside me and asked, "Can you draw?" I laughed. "Not very well." She smiled. "Perfect." "Me neither." Everyone laughed. Suddenly, I realized something important. Children are not afraid to be imperfect. They try, fail, laugh, and continue anyway. Researchers say children learn faster because they are less afraid of making mistakes. Adults often slow themselves down because fear becomes stronger than curiosity. Eleanor nodded when I shared this thought. "Exactly," she said. "Curiosity is more powerful than fear." Then she challenged me. "Today, be curious like a child." That sounded simple, but it was powerful advice. During lunch, everyone sat around a large wooden table. There was roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread, and salad. The atmosphere felt peaceful. Then Sarah asked a question. "Mom, what was your favorite childhood memory?" Eleanor smiled immediately. "Summer picnics with my parents." Then she looked at me. "What about you?" I smiled and answered slowly. "Family meals and hearing stories from older relatives." Everyone smiled warmly. Nobody cared if my sentence was perfect. They cared about the meaning behind my words. That realization felt incredible. Then Michael said something interesting. "Stories keep families alive." Eleanor nodded proudly. Stories also keep languages alive. Once again, life and English connected together naturally. According to memory researchers, storytelling improves retention because the brain processes emotional experiences more deeply than isolated facts. In simple words, stories are easier to remember than random information. Suddenly, I understood why this channel uses stories instead of boring lessons. Stories create emotional memories. Emotional memories build language, naturally. Then Eleanor surprised everyone. She stood up and brought out an old wooden box. "Today, I want to share something special," she said. My curiosity exploded instantly. Inside the box were dozens of handwritten notes. Emma smiled. "Grandma's happiness notes." I looked surprised. Eleanor laughed. "For years, every family member has written one happy memory every month." My eyes widened. There were hundreds of notes inside. She opened one. "Today, Emma taught me how to draw a butterfly." Another said, "Today, we laughed for 10 minutes because Grandpa told a silly joke." Another said, "Today, the rain smelled wonderful." I smiled because these memories were beautifully simple. Then Eleanor said something unforgettable. People often chase giant moments and miss the tiny miracles happening every day.
Wow.
Tiny miracles. That phrase immediately touched my heart. According to positive psychology studies, gratitude practices improve emotional well-being and reduce stress. People who regularly appreciate small moments often report higher levels of happiness. Eleanor had been practicing this for decades without calling it a scientific exercise. She simply called it living. Then she looked directly at me. "Can you write one happiness note?" I nodded immediately. I wrote, "Today I learned that families are built through small moments." Eleanor smiled proudly. "Beautiful." Then she added another lesson. English becomes easier when emotions are involved. That made sense. I was remembering every sentence because they were connected to feelings, not pressure. As the afternoon continued, the grandchildren played outside while Eleanor sat beside me quietly. Then she whispered something surprising. "Tomorrow, I want to tell you a secret about friendship." I smiled immediately. "Another secret?" She laughed. "Yes, and it might surprise you." My curiosity exploded again. "What is it?" She smiled mischievously. "Tomorrow, I will explain why age never mattered between us." Suddenly, my heart felt warm. Because honestly, I had stopped seeing Eleanor as an 80-year-old woman. She had become my true friend. Tomorrow, I would discover why that happened and why human connection often ignores the numbers people use to define themselves. And somehow, I already knew tomorrow's lesson would completely change the way I understand friendship forever. Why age never mattered between. What if one of the biggest lies society teaches us is that friendships only work when people are the same age? Before today's story begins, I want you to imagine something unusual. Imagine telling someone that your best friend is an 80-year-old American woman, and instead of understanding, they look surprised and ask, "What do you even talk about?" That exact question happened to me several times. At first, I did not know how to answer. But today, Eleanor was about to reveal a secret that would completely change my understanding of friendship, human connection, and even the way we learn English. And honestly, what she told me might become one of the most important lessons of my entire life. The morning was peaceful. The sun was shining, and a gentle breeze moved through the trees outside Eleanor's house. She was sitting on her porch with a blanket over her knees and a cup of tea in her hands. She smiled when she saw me walking toward her. "Good morning, my friend," she said warmly. That sentence always made me smile. Not because the English was complicated, but because it felt genuine. Sometimes the simplest words carry the biggest emotions. I sat beside her and immediately asked, "How can two people with such a large age difference become best friends?" She laughed softly. "That is exactly what we're going to talk about today." Then she became serious for a moment. People are often obsessed with numbers. I looked curious. She continued, "Age, salary, followers, grades, likes, and years of experience." Then she smiled. "But the heart is terrible at mathematics." I laughed immediately. The heart is terrible at mathematics. That sentence was funny and beautiful at the same time. Then she explained, "The heart only recognizes kindness, honesty, and connection."
Wow.
That sentence instantly stayed inside my mind. Then she pointed toward two birds sitting together on a fence. "Do they care about age?" she asked. I laughed. "Probably not." She nodded. "Exactly." Then she looked at me and smiled. Humans often create walls that do not exist. According to social psychologists, meaningful friendships are built primarily on shared values rather than age similarities. In simple words, people connect because they understand each other, not because they were born in the same decade. Suddenly, everything made sense. Then Eleanor told me a story I had never heard before. "When I was 50 years old," she said, "one of my closest friends was 25. My eyes widened. "Really?" She laughed. "Of course." Then she smiled mischievously. She taught me how to use a computer. I laughed immediately. And what did you teach her? Eleanor smiled warmly. How to stop worrying about everything. We both laughed. Then she added another beautiful sentence. Friendships work when both people become teachers and students.
Wow.
Teachers and students at the same time. That sentence felt powerful because it explained our friendship perfectly.
She was teaching me about life.
I was teaching her new perspectives too. Then she looked directly at me. Do you know why our friendship became strong? I shook my head. She smiled. Because neither of us tried to impress the other. That sentence surprised me. She continued. We simply showed up as ourselves. According to researchers, authentic relationships increase emotional well-being because people spend less energy pretending to be someone else. In simple words, being yourself is less exhausting than performing. Suddenly, I understood why I always felt relaxed around Eleanor. There was no pressure, no competition, no need to appear perfect. Then she surprised me again. Can I confess something? She asked. I smiled. Of course. She laughed softly. At 80 years old, I still do not know everything. I laughed immediately. Really? She nodded proudly. Wonderful, isn't it? Then she said something that completely changed my perspective. The day you think you know everything is the day you stop growing.
Wow.
That sentence immediately touched my heart. Scientists agree. Lifelong learning improves brain health and emotional resilience. Older adults who continue learning new skills often maintain stronger cognitive function. Eleanor was living proof of that idea. Then she smiled and pointed at my notebook. Do you remember your English when we first met? I laughed nervously.
Yes.
I was scared. She nodded. And now? I smiled. I feel comfortable. She looked proud. Exactly. Then she said something unforgettable. Confidence is borrowed before it becomes your own. That sentence surprised me. She explained. Sometimes another person's belief in you helps you believe in yourself. That made perfect sense. At the beginning of this journey, I borrowed her confidence. Slowly, it was becoming my own. According to psychologists, social support accelerates skill development because encouragement reduces fear and increases persistence. In simple words, kind people help us grow faster. Then Eleanor smiled and said, that is why friendships are powerful. Suddenly, I realized something important. This entire journey was never just about English. It was about courage. It was about human connection. It was about discovering that we are not supposed to learn alone. Then she challenged me with another question. What have you learned from our friendship? I paused for a moment and answered carefully. I learned that age is not a barrier. Fear is a barrier. And fear can disappear. She smiled proudly. Beautiful answer. Then she added another sentence that immediately touched my heart. Life becomes easier when curiosity becomes stronger than judgment.
Wow.
Curiosity stronger than judgment. That sentence felt powerful because society often teaches us to judge first. Eleanor taught me to become curious first. Then she suddenly looked excited. Tomorrow will be fun. I smiled immediately. Another secret? She laughed.
Yes.
Then she reached into her pocket and showed me a small list. Tomorrow, I will teach you 10 simple English phrases Americans use every day. My eyes widened instantly. Really? She nodded proudly. But I will teach them through real-life stories, not boring lessons. My curiosity exploded again. Because by now, I already knew Eleanor's secret. She never taught English directly. She taught life first and English naturally followed. And somehow, I already had a feeling that tomorrow's lesson would reveal another beautiful surprise hidden inside ordinary conversations that millions of English learners completely overlook every day. 10 simple English phrases that changed my life. What if I told you that 10 simple English phrases could make you sound more natural than memorizing 1,000 difficult words? Before today's story begins, imagine sitting beside your 80-year-old American best friend while she smiles and says, "Today, I will teach you a secret most English learners never discover." Immediately, my curiosity exploded. For years, I believed becoming fluent meant learning complicated vocabulary, advanced grammar, and difficult expressions. But Eleanor was about to prove something completely different. She was about to show me that simple English, when connected to real life, can become incredibly powerful. And honestly, today's lesson would completely change the way I speak forever. The morning was beautiful. Sunlight filled the kitchen while Eleanor prepared pancakes and fresh fruit for breakfast. Soft jazz music played quietly in the background. She looked excited, almost like a teacher preparing a surprise for her favorite student. Then she smiled and placed a notebook in front of me. On the first page, she wrote one sentence. Simple English creates real conversations. I smiled immediately because this had become her philosophy. Then she laughed and said, "Ready for your first phrase?" I nodded. She smiled and said, "How's your day going?" I blinked. "That's all?"
She laughed.
Exactly. Then she explained that many Americans use this question every day because it sounds friendly and natural. It is more conversational than simply asking, "How are you?" Then she challenged me. "Ask me." I smiled and said, "How's your day going?" She answered cheerfully, "Wonderful. I'm spending time with my best friend." That made me laugh. Then she said something important. Language grows faster when emotions are involved. Scientists agree. Emotional learning strengthens memory because the brain prioritizes meaningful experiences over isolated information. Suddenly, I realized why I remembered every conversation with Eleanor. They were full of feelings, not pressure. Then she wrote phrase number 2. Take your time. She smiled. This is one of my favorites. I laughed. Because you say it all the time. She nodded proudly.
Exactly.
Many English learners panic when speaking. Then she looked at me and said slowly, "Take your time."
Wow.
Even hearing those words made me feel calmer. According to psychologists, reducing time pressure lowers anxiety and improves performance. In simple words, your brain works better when it does not feel attacked. Then she wrote phrase number 3. That sounds interesting. I smiled. People say that often? She nodded. Very often. She explained that Americans use this phrase to encourage conversations and show genuine interest.
Then she laughed.
People love being heard. That sentence immediately stayed inside my mind. Then she taught me phrase number 4. I never thought about it that way. I smiled because it sounded useful. She laughed. It is magical. Then she explained. This sentence opens your mind instead of closing it. Suddenly, I understood something deeper. Good conversations are not about proving people wrong. They are about discovering new perspectives. Then she wrote phrase number 5. I appreciate that. She smiled warmly. Gratitude builds stronger relationships. According to positive psychology researchers, expressing appreciation improves emotional well-being and strengthens social bonds. In simple words, gratitude creates happier humans. Then she looked at me. Say it. I smiled. I appreciate that. She laughed happily. Perfect. Then she taught me phrase number 6. No worries. I laughed because I had heard Americans say it many times. She nodded. It helps create a relaxed atmosphere. Then she added something funny. People think fluency sounds impressive. Actually, fluency often sounds comfortable. That sentence surprised me. Comfortable, not impressive. Suddenly, my goal changed. I no longer wanted to sound perfect. I wanted to sound natural. Then she wrote phrase number 7. That's a good question. She smiled. This phrase buys your brain extra time. I laughed immediately. That's clever. She laughed too. Exactly. According to communication experts, small conversational buffers reduce stress and increase confidence. In simple words, they help your brain organize thoughts before answering. Then she taught me phrase number 8. I understand how you feel. She became serious for a moment. Empathy is powerful. Then she smiled softly. People rarely forget kindness.
Wow.
That sentence immediately touched my heart. Then she taught me phrase number 9. One step at a time. I smiled because she had already said that phrase many times before. She nodded proudly. Because most people quit when they focus on the entire mountain instead of the next step. Research supports this idea. Breaking large goals into smaller actions increases motivation and persistence. Suddenly, I understood why my English had improved. Eleanor never overwhelmed me. She always focused on one tiny step. Then she wrote phrase number 10. I'm proud of you. I looked up immediately. She smiled warmly. This phrase changes lives. Then she said something beautiful. Many adults hear criticism every day, but rarely hear encouragement. That sentence felt true. Then she looked directly at me and said slowly, I'm proud of you. My heart immediately felt warm. I smiled and answered, Thank you. Then she laughed softly.
See?
English can heal people too. That sentence touched me deeply. Maybe language was always meant to connect hearts, not impress strangers. Then she challenged me again. Can you repeat all 10 phrases? I smiled and did it slowly. To my surprise, I remembered every single one.
Why?
Because each phrase was connected to a story. According to neuroscience, storytelling improves recall because emotional experiences activate multiple areas of the brain simultaneously. In simple words, stories make learning stick. Then Eleanor smiled proudly. Now you know my secret. I laughed. Life first. English second. She pointed at me excitedly. Exactly. Then she suddenly became quiet. Tomorrow will be different. My curiosity exploded instantly. Different how? She smiled softly. Tomorrow, I will tell you about the loneliest period of my entire life. My eyes widened immediately. The loneliest period? That surprised me because Eleanor always seemed joyful. Could someone so wise and happy have once felt deeply lonely? She smiled gently and whispered, Everyone carries invisible battles. Suddenly, my heart became curious again. Because somehow, I already knew tomorrow's story would reveal another hidden truth about loneliness, healing, and happiness that millions of people silently struggle to understand every single day. The loneliest season of my life. What if I told you that even the happiest person you know may have once cried alone in silence? Before today's story begins, I want you to imagine something. Imagine sitting beside your cheerful 80-year-old American best friend, a woman who always smiles, always encourages others, and always seems peaceful. And suddenly she says, There was a time when loneliness almost defeated me. Immediately, my heart became quiet. I was shocked because Eleanor always looked strong. But today, she was about to reveal one of the deepest chapters of her life, and somehow, I already knew this story would help millions of people who secretly feel lonely while pretending to be fine every day. The morning felt different. The sky was gray, and gentle rain tapped softly against her windows. Eleanor was sitting in her favorite chair holding a cup of tea. There was no music today.
No laughter.
Just peaceful silence. She smiled when I walked in, but her eyes looked thoughtful. Today is an important story, she said quietly. I sat beside her immediately. Then she took a deep breath and said, 5 years ago, after Thomas passed away, I experienced the loneliest season of my life. Suddenly, my heart felt heavy. I looked at her carefully. It was difficult to imagine someone who radiated so much warmth feeling completely alone. She nodded as if she could read my thoughts. Loneliness does not always look sad from the outside, she said. Sometimes loneliness is invisible.
Wow.
That sentence immediately stayed inside my mind. Invisible loneliness. According to psychologists, loneliness is one of the most common emotional struggles in modern society. Millions of people experience loneliness even when surrounded by other people. In simple words, being alone and feeling lonely are not the same thing. Eleanor understood that deeply. Then she continued her story. After Thomas was gone, the house became very quiet. She smiled softly. Too quiet. Then she laughed a little. I never realized how much noise love creates. That sentence immediately touched my heart. Noise love creates. The sound of footsteps. The sound of laughter. The sound of conversations. The sound of another person simply existing beside you. Suddenly, I understood how silence could become painful. Then she said something surprising. The hardest moment was breakfast. I looked curious. Breakfast. She nodded. For 52 years, I said good morning to someone. Suddenly, I felt emotional. One tiny habit disappearing after decades could completely change a person's world. Then she smiled gently. That taught me something important. I leaned forward.
What?
She answered, never underestimate small routines. According to neuroscience, routines provide emotional stability because they create a sense of predictability and security. When routines disappear suddenly, the brain can feel lost and overwhelmed. Eleanor experienced exactly that. Then she laughed softly. One morning, I almost spent an entire day without speaking to another human being. That sentence shocked me. She nodded. Loneliness grows in silence. Then she looked directly at me. That is why human connection is medicine.
Wow.
Human connection is medicine. That sentence felt powerful because it was true. Then she explained what she did next. I made one tiny promise to myself. I smiled. What promise? She answered proudly. Talk to one person every day. Just one person. That was all. Some days it was a neighbor. Some days it was a cashier at a grocery store. Some days it was a friend. She smiled. Tiny conversations saved me. According to researchers, even brief social interactions improve emotional well-being and reduce feelings of isolation. In simple words, small connections matter more than we realize. Then she laughed and said something funny. Your brain is like a houseplant. I laughed immediately. A houseplant. She nodded proudly.
Yes.
It needs sunlight, water, and human connection. We both laughed together. Then she became serious again. Many people are waiting for life to become perfect before they become happy. She shook her head gently. Do not wait. That sentence immediately touched my heart. Then she told me about another habit she created. Every evening, she wrote down 3 things she appreciated that day. One day she wrote, Today, a stranger smiled at me. Another day she wrote, Today, the rain smelled beautiful. Another day she wrote, Today, I learned something new. She smiled and said, Tiny joys become powerful when you collect them. According to positive psychology studies, gratitude practices improve emotional resilience and reduce symptoms of sadness over time. In simple words, your brain begins noticing more good things when you intentionally search for them. Then Eleanor looked directly at me. "Can I ask you a question?" I nodded. She smiled softly. "Have you ever felt lonely?" I paused for a moment. Then I answered honestly.
Yes.
She nodded immediately. "Almost everyone has." Then she said something unforgettable. "Loneliness is not proof that something is wrong with you. It is proof that you need connection."
Wow.
That sentence immediately removed a heavy feeling from my heart. Then she smiled and added, "And asking for connection is brave, not weak." According to psychologists, reaching out for support increases emotional resilience and reduces long-term stress. In simple words, humans heal faster together. Suddenly, everything made sense. Maybe strength is not pretending to be okay. Maybe strength is allowing yourself to be human. Then Eleanor laughed softly. "You know something funny?" I smiled. "What?"
She pointed at me.
"Meeting you helped me too." My eyes widened. "Really?" She nodded proudly. "Of course." Then she said something beautiful. "Friendship heals both people at the same time." That sentence immediately touched my heart. Sometimes we think we are receiving help, but we are also giving help without realizing it. Then she smiled warmly. "That is why our friendship is special." I smiled too, because she was right. Then she suddenly became excited. "Tomorrow will be a happy day." My curiosity exploded instantly. "Why?" She laughed. "Because I have a surprise for you." I smiled immediately. "Another secret?" She nodded proudly. "Yes." Then she whispered, "Tomorrow, I will give you a gift that I have been preparing for a very long time." My eyes widened. A gift? What kind of gift could an 80-year-old American best friend possibly prepare that would be so meaningful? She simply smiled and looked out the window while the rain slowly stopped. And somehow, I already knew tomorrow's story would reveal one final beautiful lesson about friendship, gratitude, and the invisible connections that quietly change our lives forever. The gift that changed my life forever. What if the most valuable gift you will ever receive is not expensive, not made of gold, and not something you can buy in a store? Before today's story begins, I want you to imagine something. Imagine arriving at your 80-year-old American best friend's house on a peaceful morning, and before you even sit down, she smiles and says, "I've been preparing something for you for many months." Immediately, my curiosity exploded. My mind started creating hundreds of possibilities. Was it an old family photo? Was it a handwritten letter? Was it a book full of memories? But deep inside, I already knew it would be something much bigger than an ordinary object. Because every lesson Eleanor had given me so far was never truly about English. It was always about learning how to live a fuller, calmer, and happier life. The morning felt beautiful. The sky was bright blue, and birds were singing outside her house. The air smelled fresh after yesterday's rain. Eleanor opened the door with her usual warm smile, but today there was an extra sparkle in her eyes. "Good morning, my friend," she said cheerfully. I smiled immediately. "Good morning." Then she laughed softly. "Today is a special day." My curiosity instantly grew stronger. I sat down at the kitchen table while she prepared tea. She moved slowly and peacefully, exactly the same way she always did. Suddenly, I realized something. For months, she had never rushed anything. She had shown me a completely different rhythm of life. According to researchers, slowing down intentional daily activities can reduce stress and improve emotional regulation. In simple words, slowing down helps the brain breathe. Eleanor had mastered this art years ago. Then she walked toward a small wooden drawer and carefully pulled out a blue notebook. She placed it in front of me and smiled. "This is your gift." I looked surprised. "A notebook?" She laughed. "Not just a notebook." Then she opened the first page. My eyes widened immediately. Every page was filled with handwritten notes. There were English phrases, life lessons, quotes, memories, and tiny stories from all our days together. Suddenly, my heart felt warm. She had been creating this gift for months. Then I saw something beautiful written at the top of the page. "English is not a subject. English is a bridge."
Wow.
That sentence immediately touched my heart. English is a bridge, not a test, not a competition, not a burden, a bridge. Then Eleanor smiled and explained. Language connects people who would otherwise remain strangers. According to neuroscientists, meaningful communication activates emotional and social regions of the brain simultaneously, making conversations more memorable than isolated information. Suddenly, everything we had done together made perfect sense. She never taught vocabulary lists first. She built bridges first. Then she smiled and pointed at another sentence inside the notebook. "Progress is invisible until one day it is impossible to ignore." I laughed softly because she had said similar things before. She nodded proudly. "Because it is true." Then she asked me a question. "Do you remember how nervous you were during your first family dinner?" I laughed immediately.
Yes.
I almost panicked. She smiled. "And now?" I answered honestly. "Now I enjoy speaking." She pointed at me and smiled. That is progress. According to psychologists, people often underestimate their improvement because they focus too much on what they still cannot do instead of noticing what they can already do. In simple words, our brains are sometimes unfair judges. Then Eleanor laughed and said, "Humans are funny creatures." I smiled.
Why?
She answered, "We climb mountains and then complain we are not flying." We both laughed immediately. Then she became serious for a moment. "Celebrate small victories." That sentence immediately stayed inside my head. Celebrate small victories. Then she showed me another page in the notebook. There was a list called "Things I Hope You Never Forget." The first sentence said, "Mistakes are evidence of courage." The second said, "Speak before you feel ready." The third said, "Curiosity is stronger than fear." The fourth said, "Friendship has no age limit." The fifth said, "Your voice deserves to be heard." My eyes became emotional. These were not just English lessons anymore. They were life principles. Then Eleanor smiled softly and said something unforgettable. "Most people spend years searching for confidence." I nodded. She continued, "Confidence is usually built one tiny action at a time."
Wow.
That sentence felt powerful. Research supports this idea. Repeated small successes gradually strengthen self-belief. In simple words, confidence is not found. It is built. Then Eleanor pointed toward the final pages of the notebook. There was a section called Daily 5 Minutes. She smiled. "I created a simple routine for you." The routine was beautiful. 1 minute to read English aloud. 1 minute to describe the weather. 1 minute to remember a happy moment. 1 minute to say one thing you appreciate. 1 minute to ask yourself an interesting question. 5 minutes total. She laughed softly.
No excuses.
I laughed too. According to behavioral scientists, small consistent routines are easier to maintain than overwhelming goals. In simple words, tiny habits survive longer. Suddenly, I understood another one of her secrets. Success often looks boring at first because it is built from tiny repeated actions. Then Eleanor looked directly at me. Can I ask one final question? I nodded immediately. She smiled warmly. What did our friendship teach you? I paused for a moment because there were too many answers. Then I answered slowly. It taught me that life is not a race. It taught me that mistakes are normal. It taught me that English is about people. And it taught me that age cannot stop friendship. Eleanor smiled proudly, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Then she said something beautiful. Perfect. After a few seconds, she looked out the window and whispered, "Tomorrow will be our final lesson together." My heart immediately felt emotional. The final lesson? That sentence surprised me. She smiled softly and said, "Tomorrow, I want to leave you with one message that you will hopefully remember for the rest of your life." My curiosity instantly exploded one last time. Because if every day with Eleanor had already transformed the way I think about life, language, and happiness, I could only imagine how powerful her final message would be. And somehow, deep inside my heart, I already knew tomorrow's lesson would become something I would carry with me forever. The final message I will never forget. What if one sentence could completely change the way you see friendship, love, family, happiness, and even your journey of learning English forever? Before today's final story begins, I want you to imagine something beautiful. Imagine walking toward your 80-year-old American best friend's house for one last lesson, knowing that every conversation you shared has already transformed your life in ways you never expected. Imagine seeing her smile at you and whisper, "Today, I want to leave you with one message that you will carry for the rest of your life." Immediately, my heart felt both happy and emotional because I already knew this was not simply the end of an English story. It was the beginning of a completely different way of living. The morning was peaceful and bright. The sky looked endless, and soft sunlight covered her garden. Birds sang from the trees while a gentle breeze moved through the flowers she had planted years ago with Thomas. Eleanor was sitting on her porch in her favorite chair, holding a small photo album in her hands. She smiled warmly when she saw me approaching. "Good morning, my friend," she said softly. I smiled immediately because those 4 words had become one of my favorite English phrases in the world. They were simple, but they carried so much meaning. I sat beside her quietly, and for a few moments, neither of us spoke. Somehow, the silence felt peaceful instead of uncomfortable. Then she laughed softly. "You know something funny?" I smiled. "What?" She pointed toward me. "You are no longer learning English." I blinked in surprise. "I'm not." She smiled proudly.
No.
"You are living English."
Wow.
That sentence instantly touched my heart. Living English. According to language experts, true fluency is not about translating every word inside your head. It is about naturally connecting thoughts, feelings, and experiences to communication. Suddenly, I realized she was right. I no longer thought about grammar every second. I was simply sharing life. Then Eleanor opened the photo album. Inside were pictures from every stage of her life. There were pictures of her as a child, pictures with Thomas, pictures with her children, her grandchildren, and even recent photos of our friendship together. She smiled and said, "This is my life story." Then she pointed at an empty page at the end. "And this page is for tomorrow." My eyes widened. "Tomorrow?" She nodded. "Yes. We are never finished growing." That sentence immediately stayed inside my mind. So many people believe life slows down with age, but Eleanor had shown me the opposite. Growth has no expiration date. According to researchers, maintaining curiosity throughout life supports emotional health and cognitive strength. In simple words, staying curious keeps us alive inside. Then she looked directly at me. "That is my final lesson." I smiled. "Stay curious?" She nodded proudly. Always. Then she laughed and said, curious people suffer less because they replace fear with questions.
Wow.
Replace fear with questions. That sentence felt powerful because it was true. Fear often says, what if I fail? Curiosity says, what can I learn? Fear says, what if people judge me? Curiosity says, what interesting person might I meet? Suddenly, I realized curiosity had quietly changed my entire journey. Then Eleanor became serious for a moment. Can I tell you one last secret? I smiled immediately. Of course. She looked out toward the garden and whispered, people think happiness is a destination. Then she shook her head gently. It is actually a collection. I looked curious. She smiled. A collection of tiny moments. Then she began naming them. Morning tea, family dinners, shared laughter, a kind conversation, learning a new word, a peaceful walk, helping someone else, listening carefully. She smiled again. That is happiness. According to positive psychology researchers, people who regularly appreciate ordinary moments often experience greater life satisfaction than people constantly chasing extraordinary achievements. In simple words, happiness often hides inside ordinary days. Then she looked directly at me. Promise me something. I nodded immediately. Promise me you will never postpone happiness. That sentence immediately touched my heart. So many people say, I will be happy when I become fluent. I will be happy when I earn more money. I will be happy when life becomes easier. Eleanor smiled softly. Do not wait. Then she said something unforgettable. Life is happening while you are preparing to live it.
Wow.
That sentence instantly stayed inside my soul. Then she laughed softly. Also, please stop being so hard on yourself. I laughed too. I'm trying. She pointed at me and smiled.
Good.
Because perfection is boring. We both laughed together. Then she added, progress is beautiful because it is imperfect. According to psychologists, self-compassion improves motivation and long-term performance more effectively than self-criticism. In simple words, kindness helps humans grow faster. Then Eleanor stood up slowly and handed me the notebook one final time. On the last page, she had written a message. It said, if one person listens to this story and decides not to give up, then every conversation was worth it. My eyes immediately became emotional, because suddenly I understood the real purpose behind everything she had taught me. This was never just about me. It was about passing kindness forward. Then she smiled and asked, will you do that? I smiled warmly.
Yes.
She nodded proudly. Perfect. Then she whispered her final sentence. Friendship can ignore age because the heart does not count years. It only counts moments.
Wow.
That sentence felt like the perfect ending.
I looked around one last time.
The peaceful garden, the bright sky, the warm smile on Eleanor's face. And I realized something beautiful. Sometimes, the most extraordinary friendships begin in the most ordinary ways. A conversation, a cup of coffee, a simple hello. And one day, those tiny moments quietly transform your life forever. If you are listening today and learning English one small step at a time, remember this. You do not have to be perfect. You do not have to be fearless. You only need to stay curious, stay kind, and continue showing up every day because every tiny effort is building a future version of yourself that will one day look back and smile with gratitude. Before you leave this video, I want to ask you one simple question. What if this was never really an English lesson? What if, during these quiet moments together, you were actually rebuilding something much bigger? Maybe you were rebuilding your confidence. Maybe you were rebuilding your courage. Maybe you were rebuilding the version of yourself that life slowly made you forget. Today, you did something extraordinary. You didn't chase perfection. You didn't memorize hundreds of difficult words. You simply listened, felt, imagined, and connected with another human being through a beautiful story. And that is exactly how real English is learned. Not through pressure, not through fear, but through emotions, memories, and small moments that stay in your heart long after the lesson ends. Remember this. One day, you will suddenly realize something incredible. The English that once felt impossible will become natural. The sentences that once felt difficult will become effortless. The fear that once stopped you will quietly disappear. And you may not even notice the exact moment it happens, because real transformation is silent, just like a tree growing, just like a friendship becoming stronger, just like a new version of yourself slowly appearing every single day. Maybe somewhere in the world, there is already another person waiting to meet the future version of you. A version that speaks with confidence. A version that smiles without fear. A version that is no longer afraid to start conversations. A version that finally believes, I am good enough. And perhaps, years from now, you will tell someone your own beautiful story and say, I didn't learn English. I lived it. That might become the most important sentence of your entire journey. So before you go, I have one small challenge for you.
Do not stop here.
Come back tomorrow. Listen again. Speak one sentence. Learn one new phrase. Smile one more time. Because tiny actions repeated every day create extraordinary results. And who knows? The next story you hear on this channel may become the story that changes your life forever. If this video made your heart feel a little lighter, if this story reminded you that friendship can ignore age, and if it gave you the courage to continue your English journey, please support this channel. Like this video to help more people discover slow English through meaningful stories. Comment. Friendship has no age limit. Subscribe and turn on notifications because a brand new American English story is waiting for you in the next video. And remember, you are not late. You are not behind. You are not too old. You are not alone. You are simply one story away from becoming a new version of yourself.
See you in the next story.
Because the next story may reveal a secret about life, love, family, and happiness that most people never discover. Stay curious. Stay kind. Keep speaking English. And never stop believing in yourself.